and I'll just briefly introduce them. We have over there Dr. Stephen Rainey. He's a research fellow in the Oxford O'Hara Centre for Practical Ethics, and he works on therapeutic brain-computer interfaces that will enable communication for users with debilitating speech conditions, and he has teaching and research interests in philosophy of language, rationality, governance, and artificial intelligence. Next, we have Andy Thomason, who started developing computers for the Sony PlayStation and teaching game programming at Goldsmiths, but now he works for Oxford Genomics, who use machine learning techniques to unravel the mechanics of how humans work. He also works on how we can use our understanding of biology to create thinking machines that can enhance our collective intellect and what impact this will have on the future of humankind. Next, we have Ian Buxton, who assures me that he would like to be described as an amateur thinker, because that's the best kind, but who has given many talks to Philosophy for All. And then we have Mark Fielding. He's taught at UCL, Birkbeck College, Open University, and the University of Greenwich. He holds degrees from Manchester and UCL, and amongst other things, he's worked on books on philosophy and horror, and the nature of political utopias in the contemporary world. Some people also know him as a lecturer at the London School of Philosophy. And then finally, Bernard Hurley, who will be known again to many of you who've been to Philosophy for All talks. His interests range across mathematics and philosophy. A few months ago, he gave us a fantastic talk on Gottlob Frege. And so that's our panel. We're going to start by inviting the panel members to spend just 2 or 3 minutes picking out what they regard as the main or the most interesting or the most exciting or perhaps the most threatening issues in this whole field of AI and perfectibility of humanity. Then we'll have a discussion amongst the panelists about themes that come out from that, and we'll take a few more comments from the panelists, maybe get some more themes to develop. And then towards the end, we should be able to have time to take some comments from you, the audience, and we'll ask our panelists to respond to them. So I'm going to start with Stephen. Over to you.
Thank you very much. I suppose it's probably worth saying a few things about what the singularity is supposed to be, given that's what's going to animate what I'm going to say. The idea is that there's a point coming up in artificial intelligence research where machines become so intelligent that they take on a kind of ability to go beyond our ability to stop them or to control them. This is called a singularity in the same sense as a black hole has a singularity. It's the point beyond which we can't see. The frightening part of this is supposed to be that these super intelligent AIs will pursue their goals at the expense of anything but their goals, and so we as a species are in grave danger from this. So even if your AI its entire purpose was to create paper clips, in one sort of example, it could result in the destruction of the entire universe as the AI sought all the resources, all the power, and all the energy it needed to make as many paper clips as possible. So we're doomed. This is the kind of picture that people like Nick Bostrom like to talk about in the Future of Humanity Institute at Oxford. For me, the dangers of this aren't so much the AI themselves, it's about what we do with the technology. So if you think about a sort of sentence like, if there's a super intelligence coming in the future based in AI, then we're doomed. It's sort of got the same structure as if there's a monster under the bed, we're all doomed. The problem is it's all conditional, so if there is, then we're doomed either way, but I think we need to be as worried about monsters under the bed as we do about the superintelligence. This is because the superintelligence has no interests. This AI future has no interest, has no values. If it was to try and pursue its own ends to any extreme, we could just imagine that it's as likely it would just stop as carry on. And this is, you can relate this to what's called the frame problem in AI. So if you think about an artificial intelligence that you've asked to paint your kitchen, it might start, it might do it well, but if a fly buzzes through the room, it might just stop because you haven't told it what to do when flies arrive. So this artificial intelligence has this goal which will pursue at any cost, but whenever something unexpected and unplanned takes place, it just stops. It's got nothing to do with that. So the question would be, how would we frame the sort of parameters, the fundamental parameters of any software system, in order that it could cope with an open-ended future, and that just seems impossible. So the way Luciano Floridi put this in a recent article was that the superintelligence, the artificial intelligence sort of singularity is logically possible but utterly implausible, and I think that's pretty much the position I'm coming from. So that's my sort of take on things.
Hi there, yes, I'm rather more optimistic about the future, I think. My panel colleague has pointed out, there is the possibility of the Terminator scenario where evil robots stalk the streets, shooting down anyone they see, but it's highly improbable, really, in terms of the way things are going with actual technology. So if we look at the sort of history of technology in the past, we can see that technologies often coexist. So we have new technology, for instance, in the form of mining machines, which mine the equivalent of thousands of miners, and they're 1,000 times more efficient than the miner used to be. And this is the situation we're currently in with machine intelligence, where machine intelligence can do simple repetitive tasks thousands of times better and faster than we can. However, they're not stalking down the street shooting us as a result. If we got to the point, and it's quite possible and likely we will get to the point in the future where machine intelligences are similar to us in as much as they have similar goals and ambitions, and they can certainly think the same way we can. There's no doubt that we can make fake humans in the same kind of way we do in computer games, which are very, very convincing. We've already got past the Turing test very easily with some of our more primitive AIs, and the AIs in the future will become so sophisticated that they'll stop pretending to be us and just get on and do their own thing. But these intelligences are they don't need to ravage the Earth for resources, because they don't need much resources. A computer needs a bit of silicon, sand. There's plenty of that. We can let them have all the sand if they like, because we don't really care about that. So machine intelligences are not particularly likely to go off and kill us. Besides, as with all technologies, we just switch jobs. We switch from being coal miners to being work in service industries, and we moved our jobs somewhere else. We'll enhance our own intelligences and become competitive with the machine intelligences, and our evolution will continue to evolve as the machine intelligences evolve with us.
I was told I wouldn't have time to read out my spiel here, but I'm going to read out about half of it, which is kind of 50% philosophical and 50% sort of mathematical physics in a sense. So, here we go. Tell me if I'm not articulating clearly. Part and parcel of the modern mythos, a relatively beneficent one in my opinion, is the ultimate technologization of man. Sensory motor prostheses and neurocranial implants will supposedly blur increasingly the boundary between man and machine. And since in general it is possible to patch up machines indefinitely, even to the point of complete replacement of all the original components, like the ship of Theseus, then finally it will be within humanity's grasp the wherewithal for actual physical immortality, which is obviously what people like Kurzweil are after, barring mechanical or severe electrical or chemical misfortune, of course. Where several thousand years of religious belief systems have either failed to deliver, which is the economical and likely explanation, or to be charitable, but somewhat less realistic, have simply failed to supply any evidence of their alleged efficacy, the technology developed by our laborious and cumulative efforts will finally triumph, or so we're told. Irrespective of our personal opinions as to whether or not this might be a good idea, is there any substance behind this materialist appropriation of hope and eschatology? The foremost prophet of the salvational fusion of man and machine is, of course, Ray Kurzweil, who appropriated the term singularity from science fiction author Werner Winger, who introduced the term in a story written in 1993. In order to turn the idea over to determine whether the notion contains any elements of realism, let us ask, what would be entailed by the capacity to make ourselves immortal, barring nasty accidents? An immediate question raises itself. Would every sensation, emotion and thought generated by every plugged-in human on the planet be run through, say, one single CPU? One might at first glance consider this to be a technological impossibility. because it's been estimated that the average human brain, when functioning within a wakeful person, uses conservatively several petaflops, i.e. at least 1 billion operations per second. And supposing that by, say, 2045, which is the year by which time Kurzweil estimates the singularity will have been achieved, there will be 10 billion people alive. Then the singularity would need to be able to execute upwards of 10 to the 25th power of such operations per second. Conservatively, estimate that each such operation will consume just 1 microwatt. Then we're impelled to the conclusion that total power consumption will be conservatively 10 million megawatts. This is of the order of 1 million times humanity's entire current electrical power generation capacity of the entire planet. Another way of looking at the situation is to realise that only around 300,000 terawatts of solar energy on average reaches the Earth's surface every second. And so the need to sustain, which is hypothetically all enfranchising the singularity, would involve around 30 times the input of heat and light per second which the Earth receives from the Sun. How would any technology conceivably be able to achieve this? The disposal of the waste heat alone, resulting from such generation, would wreck the planet's ecosystem completely, producing prodigiously vast atmospheric convection currents and maybe 100 large hurricanes happening somewhere or other at any one time. So I'm nearly finished now, just to practice and I'll conclude in the discussion. Yet another science fictional nightmare poses itself in consideration of the fact that the singularity entity would be in effect a multiple personality, 10 billion of them by 2045. So would each of us, Andy Warhol style, be prepared to flaunt ourselves and our desires for 1 second every 30 years and lay dormant for another 30 years? What kind of immortality is that? Or would we instead simply be physically, mortally sustained and nourished, but permanently plugged into a vast, high-resolution, multi-sensory internet all the time? So I'll conclude now. Quite apart from this, the mere downloading or uploading from and to brains, where would the input and output ports be? I mean, how would we access we wouldn't be able to go through the sensory organs, we'd have to go directly to the cranium, but which parts? And having got this treatment data, are we sure that it's identical with the consciousness, which is what we're after, keeping our consciousness? That's what being alive is about. Is the exchange of data identical with consciousness? I think it is, but I'll go into that in detail later. Thanks.
There's quite a lot of echo as I'm hearing it. Are you alright? Can you hear it okay? Okay, it's just I can't hear most of what is being said on the stage, so it's alright if you were hearing it, but it might mean the questions are a bit, you need a clarification when they come. My position is broadly sceptical. If I am anything related to this, a philosopher of mind, philosopher of psychology, I am a willing cheerleader for the idea of us being looked after better by better minds than the ones we are currently electing to office, promoting to positions of authority. But one of the problems associated with arguments about artificial intelligence is the general scope of them. There seems to be quite a lot attached to how brilliant it's going to be, sometime down the line. But most of the effects of discussions and practical implementations of artificial intelligence are being realised now. I mean, next weekend in London at the O2 Arena is an event dedicated to examining the economic, productive advantages of embracing artificial intelligence. The O2 Arena, as many of you, probably all of you know, is a huge space. And they are predicting, the organisers of that event are predicting it's going to be sold out. But it's not going to be sold out by people who want to imagine a future of giant brains telling us, everything that we've been doing wrong for so long. It's going to be, populated by firms of accountants and solicitors. Because if they can save a lot of money on the sort of legwork their activity by employing artificial intelligence, they will. Now, it might not follow from that you're going to get a sort of, a science fiction scenario of super brains. But it will be the beginning of the way in which artificial intelligence finds its way into our lives. It will take away job opportunities at a training level for typically white-collar jobs. It probably has already done that to some extent in the context of blue-collar jobs. And it's in that way, I think, that artificial intelligence will find its feet within the economy, within the job practices that most of us are going to be affected by. So although I enjoy as much as everybody else the sort of high-flown sort of flights of imagination that probably are the most sort of interesting elements of discussion about AI, probably the point we get to where it's a question or difficulty for us won't be by Skynet taking over our kind of, sort of defense mechanisms and using them against us. It will by realizing that, if you want to make a will, you'll probably have to go and speak to an AI of some low-level kind. Because most of making a will or conducting a financial transaction involving buying a house is probably quite straightforward from a programming point of view. And that's where it's going to start. Now, whether that leads to the more abstract characterizations is another thing, and possibly something we'll discuss. But I was just taken, because I was ready to go as a philosopher into the kind of the highly abstract elements, by the practical ways which this is coming to implementation. And maybe that will come up in questions or discussion.
Well, the subject is of AI and the singularity. And the first speaker said something about what he thought this meant. As far as I can see, it can mean several things. It could mean, for instance, the point at which computers become more intelligent than us. Well, actually, in some ways, they are already. I have a computer at home that can certainly do a lot of intelligent things much faster than I can. Does that worry me? Not particularly. If you go back in time, what another colleague said about mining machines reminded me that there's a Chinese character that means to dig, and it's got three parts to it. One part actually represents a hand, the other part represents a hole, and the other bit is a sort of hook-shaped thing. So presumably, sort of thousands of years ago, people dug holes with hook-shaped things using their hands. If you'd shown one of them a mining machine, or even a little bobcat digger or something, they'd probably think, God, that's terrible, that's going to come after me, that's going to... Of course they don't, because we make them, we make sure they don't. Another interpretation of the singularity, which I've heard people, is when computers become autonomous and start beating us up, and start wanting to rule the world, etc. I'm very dubious that could happen. The main reason is the reason why we go around beating each other up is because of our biological evolutionary history. It's in our evolutionary interest to do that. Computers won't have that unless we try to actually program it into them. But in that case, that will be someone else using a computer to beat you up, and they might well do that. In fact, there are military robots now. And then there's a third thing, the sort of Ray Kurzweil's idea that at some point we'll all become immortal, because what we're going to do apparently is upload our minds into machines and live forever inside a machine. Now, I actually think that's meaningless, literally meaningless. I don't want to go too far into it now. I'm actually giving a talk on sort of concepts of immortality. But so look at these three things. I think two of them. One I think is meaningless. One interpretation of the singularity is so incredibly improbable that I can't see it happening. And the third one is something that's happening already. It's not really a problem. We're still the real problem is who is a political one. Who is actually going to be in control of it? It's not going to be the machines.
Okay, thank you very much, all of you. One of the themes that I detect coming out of this is whether these AI systems are going to start having goals of their own. I think that's worth exploring, because that is going to sort of change the game if it's not just doing exactly what we told it to. So if you take an example, you've built a really clever system and you say to it, please come up with methods of making agriculture more efficient. And that's very vague, and it'll have to have some subsidiary goals of its own. It'll say, right, I, the computer, need to analyse data about climate and how seeds grow and irrigation and all that kind of stuff, yeah? And that's making up goals in order to achieve its goal that we've given it of coming up with a way to make agriculture more efficient. But are we ever going to be in a position where it will come up with a goal entirely of its own? I've decided, the computer, human beings ought to do agriculture more efficiently. And I don't care if I have worries about GM crops or anything like that. This, I, the computer, have decided is what's good for them. Or I, the computer, am already running the logistics system to supply supermarkets. I've decided this ought to be improved regardless of what it does to traffic on the roads or something like that. Yeah? Because I've decided improving it is more important than that. Are we getting towards, can you see us getting towards a position where these systems will actually formulate goals of their own independently of what we might have assigned, or may pursue goals in ways that don't give weight to things that we as human beings would consider important and worth giving weight to? Who'd like to comment on that?
Don't know if I go first. Yes. So the reality is, when you buy a tin of beans from the supermarket, that tin of beans is in the supermarket on that shelf because a stock system somewhere has organised that. It's organised the transport of the metal to the factory that makes the tin, the beans, ordered the beans. Some computer system has put all the things together. Some robot has assembled the thing that human beings probably needed for that particular process. The transportation network, apart from the human driver, which is possibly a thing of the past, has delivered that tin of beans to the supermarket, and there's your tin of beans sitting on the shelf. Is that machine, that system machine, likely to say, this would be much better if we didn't have the humans? And obviously everyone worries a little bit about this. There have been many books and stories and films made about your lawnmower coming and chasing after you to chop you up because it thinks you make good fertilizer for your garden and things like this. But in practice, we do have a little bit of oversight of design when we make these systems. We do put a lot of checks and balances. In software, there's a thing called unit testing, for example, which is used extensively to make sure software systems don't misbehave. And good software practice keeps all these things under control. However, with the AI revolution, which is a wonderful new rebranding of statistics, which is what it really is. Statistics is how you calculate how many tins of beans you need for your supermarket. And with the AI revolution, we're essentially de-skilling the programmer. So you can get this thing called TensorFlow from Google, for example. You can bung some numbers into it, and out come some other numbers, and oh yes, I've solved the problem. But unfortunately, it's all a black box, and we kind of lost the oversight of what's actually going on in there. So we just need to be a little bit careful as we move to de-skilling the programming process, that we keep an eye on the sort of overall systems performance of all these big networks, and make sure they do things the way we want to. Of course, as the networks become smarter and smarter and smarter, they may want to do things their own way. But in practice, who wants to be a stock accountant if you're a super intelligent being? Why not just leave the thing which is already a stock accountant, being a stock accountant, and go off and sort of reinvent quantum physics? And that's probably what I would do if I was a super intelligent computer.
Yeah, so back to this idea about AIs not having their own values or interests. So if we think about how would a system develop its own ends, it couldn't really, because underneath it all, even though they're very impressive systems, they're Turing machines, which means they don't operate with meaning, they operate with syntax, so they just move sentences around and do logic quite fast in a way that's very, very impressive. But so the danger that they would destroy humanity comes from something like how do we make farming more efficient? Well, if you remove the humans, then farming's really efficient. So the idea would be this AI might decide that the destruction of humanity is the way to revolutionize farming. But that, again, would require that they had the ability to do that, so that would require a lot of interpretive work. It would be an incredibly tough semantic task to even make that interpretation. And it just seems it's impossible where only syntax is involved. And this sort of leads to another sort of distinction which is interesting to make in the context of AI. So we're thinking about artificial intelligence, but often what AIs actually are little programs that simulate behavior. Even if it's cognitive-looking behavior about decisions and decision-making, it's often a simulation of what we would do, but a bit faster. And that's a distinction worth making sometimes, because in terms of the black boxing that goes on, it can be very easy to see an AI and think, wow, that's just super impressive. But really it's kind of a trick, because we can't figure out how it's doing what it's doing, but it's simulating what we do every day, just the normal tasks.
Okay, thanks very much. I'm conscious of the time, so perhaps for this end of the panel I can bring in a different theme, and that's one that's in our title. We haven't talked about it very much, and this is the idea of the perfectibility of humanity. Suppose that we had easy ways to plug in extra units into your brain. We put Wikipedia or mathematics module onto a USB stick, and we'll pump it into your brain. You'll acquire these new skills. Now you might say, well, that sort of dehumanizes us, making us sort of mixtures of human and machine. I don't fancy that. But actually, I quite fancy it for me. I don't think everybody else should have it, but I'll plug it into my own brain, so it'll be jolly useful. What sorts of ethical issues, societal issues do you think will be raised by that sort of possibility, that sort of enhancement of humanity? Any thoughts?
Okay. In terms of ethical issues, we might get to a point where if we have a very sophisticated distribution program that sort of yields advantages in terms of efficiency gains, but which takes to a high degree human beings out of the process. Maybe we will come to a point where we have to have, as we've had as a development fairly recently, that large companies appoint ethical panels to review the business of the particular company in terms of its effect on climate change. we would also expand that into the ethical effects of the activity of the company in terms of its employees. Because otherwise we might be into a sort of second stage of a stealth position where if you look at assembly lines of cars nowadays, they're mainly populated by robots performing set activities that are principally aimed at sort of producing cars, the same way as human beings used to be. But that, those robots have replaced the human beings. Maybe we need to have an ethical committee that has a wider scope to consider the ways in which computational models, even if they're very much sub-AI, but heading towards, capable of being adjusted by what they find when they attempt to do what they are programmed to do. Maybe we need to have that. Would we benefit from a world where, for example, all the low-level tasks that a solicitor's firm currently engages human beings to engage in, is entirely replaced by more or less intelligent systems, because those intelligent systems are monitored and corrected and adjusted by human beings who have a wealth and weight of experience gathered over time. But those people are getting older and will retire, and we need there to be a next generation of people to engage in exactly that kind of oversight process. And the only way they can, as we understand it so far, acquire that competence is by practice. And we're almost sort of pulling the drawbridge up and giving the promise, anyway, is that we'll be able to give it to intelligent systems.
I think what Richard was getting at was things like implants in your head. What's the ethical? I think they are actually problematic for a number of reasons. One is they actually raise real political problems. You imagine you're in your country, you don't like people demonstrating. So everyone has in their head some sort of an implant, which maybe it could be communicated with by radio control or all sorts of things, which, if they do something that the government doesn't like, suddenly produces pain. Well, that is a problem. If it does something the government really likes, they get enormous pleasure. Again, that's a problem. Actually, I don't think you necessarily need anything particularly intelligent as far as artificial intelligence goes to do that. You need to get the interfaces right. But while people are trying to do that, to get the sort of interface between a brain and a piece of machinery right, they're actually opening up these other possibilities, which I think are quite dangerous.
Just regarding that point that Bernard's raised, we don't need to have implants for that. The technology for using ultrasound echo reflection intracranially has been available since 1980. Apparently it's used by the Soviet Union during the past decade, and it's been used in the so-called liberal democracies, and I know that for a fact, but I can't go any further.
Okay, we've got just under a quarter of an hour left. I think it's time to take some contributions from the audience. What I will suggest is, if we can take, say, 3 contributions, short ones, please, all together, and then I'll invite the panelists to respond to whichever of those they find most interesting. Mark, I think you may have to leave quite soon. Mark will have to leave, not because he's frightened of the audience, but because he's got another event to attend to. Okay, one at the back there.
Do you need somebody to hold the mic? Thanks very much.
Thank you. My question would be, assume an artificial intelligence which can think like a human being. So somebody got to model that software or computer in the first instance, presumably will be modeled on the human mind itself, because that's a, but how close are we to really understand how the human mind works? If we can't understand how the human mind works, how can we model it?
Okay, thanks very much. We can take a couple more and then we'll have the panel respond to all of them together. Yes, one just near there. Thanks.
Yeah, I think when dealing with the concept of human perfectibility, the panel really need to enlarge on the range of moral considerations which are connected with such a concept.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's fine, thanks.
How long will it take for computers to replace philosophers, and how can we speed that up?
I'll remain neutral on that, but I hope everyone's against the idea. Right, so we've got 3 points there. One is about understanding the human mind. We can talk glibly about replacing the human mind, enhancing the human mind, doing things similar. But we don't necessarily have a very good understanding of how the human mind, as it is, a natural biological mind, works. Second was to ask for a bit more on the moral considerations surrounding human perfectibility. And then there's this final one about replacing philosophers. Because of course philosophers are the most intelligent, the most creative. How could they possibly be replaced by a mere pocket calculator? Who'd like to start?
On the perfectibility question, it's a really interesting one because we have a tendency that Kant points out to imagine beyond our limits. So when he's talking about paralogisms, we can set up arguments that go both ways in some particular topic and then convince ourselves of what ought to be a contradiction, but we fall on one side or the other for no particular reason. And it's a little bit like that with perfectibility. We're always imagining that you can go a little faster, you can be a little taller, you can be incrementally better in some respect, but we do see that with things like athletics. So whenever you see a sprinter, you know that the next year the record might be broken, the next year the record might be broken again. But we forget that there is a point when there will be a point where you can't be the same sort of being and still go faster. So the 100-meter sprint won't take 1 second unless we're radically different. In terms of the perfectibility of human beings with AI, that's a similar thing. We keep imagining we can think faster, we can think more deeply, we can be more rational, but instead of projecting into some objective fiction that we've got this sort of end point, it's a better idea for us to think about the objectivity in terms of our own limits. So to think about what it is that, why it is that we want to go beyond some apparent limit, and that's a sort of political question which connects to what was said over there as well, that a lot of the stuff with AI and perfectibility comes down to power. Why are we trying to shift certain types of our behaviour, certain types of our activities into supposedly neutral or objective or technological systems? And that requires a lot more sort of discussion about us, maybe less so about what the AIs and what the technology themselves are for. It also connects to that intelligence question about what do we know about it, but I'll let someone else.
Yeah, so I'll address the how much we know about the mind question, essentially. We know quite a bit about, we're starting to know quite a bit about the brain. We're really just beginning with the brain at the moment. Our knowledge is about the same as biology was in the 50s when they discovered the structure of DNA, or hypothesized the structure of DNA. And we've got a lot of learning to do yet. But we do note surprising things, which is we're beginning to map the visual cortex, which is the kind of beginning process of the cognitive process. As much as we see things, they form a pattern on our retina, and then that pattern is transferred to the visual cortex at the back of your head. And we know about sort of 5 layers of how the visual cortex works. However, that doesn't mean we understand the human mind, which is much more complex than that. Maybe hundreds of layers we still need to understand. I'll just finish up. And so we're just beginning to understand that. It'll be probably the work of a century or more to fully understand. I'm fairly confident we will understand things better. And little we do know is going to make a big impact in the next decade or so in terms of being able to read people's surface thoughts and moods and things like that, and project images onto our visual cortex.
Yeah, the previous speaker has largely pre-capitulated what I intended to say, but I'd like to make a philosophical point here. We can't actually get any knowledge, as the gentleman said, in the back of the mind. There have been all sorts of ridiculous attempts, during the 19th century, psychoanalysis and these other pseudosciences which have blossomed in its wake. But really, the philosophical point here that I'd like to make is there's no such thing as the mind. There's the brain, and that's very difficult. What we need to do is look at inputs, outputs, and processing in between, just as we would with any other physical system. Mind is a fiction, it's a cultural fiction, and it's about time we got rid of it, because then we can make some more progress.
I'm not sure mind is a fiction so much. I mean, it's part of our language, we know how to use the word. What I would say about perfectibility, we're assuming that all our intelligence lies in the brain. We are actually a complete organism. Our intelligence is also to do with how we control our hands, what they do, what happens inside, even what happens inside our digestive system, etc. So the idea that just understanding the brain is going to make us make artificial humans, I think that's probably not true. But what someone wanted us to expand on was the sort of ethical problems of artificial intelligence. I don't think ethical problems really come down to who controls it. Because whoever controls it, whatever power it has, who controls it is the person who wields that power. And I don't think it's really that different from any other sort of ethical or political problem in that sense. The last thing was, when will AI replace philosophers? Well, you can go on the web and you can find a postmodern paper generator, which will generate a paper for you, complete with references, etc. It does appear that there's one part of philosophy that has been replaced by AI. Whether that bodes well for the rest of philosophy, I don't know.
I'd be inclined to interpret that as showing the pointlessness of postmodernism. But not everybody applauds. Let's just take one more contribution. We've got a little bit of time. Is the microphone still around? Hello? Yeah. Brilliant, thanks very much. Yes.
Okay, very quickly. It has been demonstrated that judges, and even the best judges, tend to give harsher sentences before lunch, that men tend to be sentenced more harshly than women, that more black people are sentenced to jail than white people for similar offences. If we were able to replace those judges, and I'm sure they're not being deliberately biased, I'm sure they are trying to use their judgment as best they can, but these things are facts about human behaviour.
In fact, I would rather be tried by a machine, or at least judged by a machine, on the grounds that it will come up with a fairer, better, and more informed result. What do you think?
Do you want to take some more questions, or? Okay.
I'm actually working with some people in the University of Mexico on legal AI to try and sort of do exactly what you're saying. The trick is that whenever you get AIs to do something like, I don't know if you've heard the flow machine stuff, where they get, Google has AIs writing songs in the styles of the Beatles and stuff like that. And it's really quite convincing, and you get other ones that will take a photograph and process it in the form of an artist, and you see it looks very similar and it's very good. When it comes to the law, you've got a different problem, because you can't have something that just looks like a legal verdict. It can't be the same as the picture processing or the music processing. It has to actually have an accountability trail that, in the same way that the law has. So what you need to have is an AI with like at least 2 steps. One which makes it look like a legal thing, and also something which reproduces normative reasoning. And that's the bit where it falls down, because as we said earlier, it's a syntax engine when it comes down to the end of it. When it comes to it, it can't deal with semantics. So what we have to try and do is innovate some kind of AI that we can make think normatively, simulate normative thinking in that way. We can get towards a sort of an app that can replace judges.
Yes, as he says, the important thing is not coming up with a judgment as a black box, but understanding the process that the judgment, the stages that went through to reason towards that judgment, so that we can have some kind of audit trail and feedback on whether that was a good process or not, and control the process. You know, in theory, we have Parliament who's supposed to control the process of the law. In practice, they seem to spend most of their time in the strangers' bar. But the law is quite a complicated thing, and it needs a lot of oversight. So we can replace a lot of the steps of in the legal process with processes which we can devise, standards we can devise for formulating law. For instance, I worked on a project where we were trying to automate the legal process of gambling in Malta, where the gambling companies have to match up to a certain set of standards and follow a certain code. And we were talking about making some software which analysed the standards produced by the gambling companies. So a lot of law can be automated, but it ultimately needs human oversight to guide it in the right direction.
Yeah, with regard to replacing the judiciary by AIs, in fact, anything, you might say management in general, lawyers in general, in fact, anyone who is not a trained technician in a scientific or mathematical sense could be replaced, because you think about it, they don't actually do anything, they just exercise power because they're trading on the history of certain traditions of interaction and expectations that people in power will pronounce the right kind of answer. I say dispense with them because it seems the more people wear suits, the more they switch off the brains. It's been my experience anyway.
Yeah, I think there probably is quite a lot of scope for AI in the sort of legal system, not just for judges, but the way we interview people, for instance, the way the police interview people. You find that one of the reasons why more or a higher proportion of, it's not just true that a higher proportion of black people get sent to prison or get higher sentences from judges. It's also true that if you take the proportion, that the higher proportion of black people actually get accused of certain crimes. And this could be down to the way they're interrogated. And the policeman might be quite honest himself. He may just think, I'm good at finding criminals. And so kind of plant incriminating thoughts into the person, when he's interviewing, and take cues, say from if a black man does a particular thing, he takes that cue that he must be guilty. If a white man does exactly the same thing, he might take that as a cue that he's innocent, without actually thinking he's doing that. So maybe some sort of AI interviewer would be better, or some sort of way of using AI to insulate the person doing the interviewing or the interrogation from the person who is being interrogated, so that they don't actually know a lot of details about them. They don't know their race, they don't know their gender, etc., or how they dress and all that sort of thing. So there's a lot of scope there. Whether it happened or not, I don't know.
Just coming again on that just very quickly. I know I've gone through it as I say, but given the echolocation technology I was talking about, you don't need to actually do anything except examine the response of the person's brain. So the whole system of so-called law and order has been a sham for about 40 years.
Okay, thanks very much. I'm afraid we're going to have to draw to a close now because we have to run everything to time at these events. We've covered lots and lots of themes. We haven't had time to explore them all properly, but I would like to thank very much all of our panelists, Stephen, Andy, Ian, Bernard, and Mark in his absence. I'd also like to thank you, the audience, for your contributions. And, well, that's it. Let's see whether any of it happens.